Two babies, two cases of violent abuse, both with mistakes made by Child Protective Services.
Tonight, Leon Hendricks is taking you inside the state's effort to make sure that it doesn't happen again.
If you have a release.
These are the faces of those on the Child Protective Services front lines, the eyes and ears of the agency charged with protecting kids in the worst of circumstances.
These are folks who are seeing some pretty traumatic stuff.
Do you know what you did was wrong today?
Yes, I do.
In February of 2012, Glenn Ross Jr. died after his father shook him violently in their Kalamazoo home.
What happened to the baby?
I don't know what happened to my daughter.
A month later, another father, another case of abuse, this time in Zeeland. Layla Kupris survived broken bones and bleeding on the brain. CPS had prior involvement with both families, and in both cases, Target 8 uncovered that a state watchdog known as the Office of Children's Ombudsman ruled that CPS caseworkers failed to recognize the danger these kids were in, something CPS calls threatened harm.
It's not always being applied in the way that it's intended.
Threatened harm was added to CPS policy in 2006, empowering caseworkers to take action when a child is, quote, found in a situation where harm is likely to occur, based on current or historical circumstances.
Did you do anything to hurt the girl?
No, I didn't. Please leave me alone.
In Layla's case, things were pretty clear-cut. Her father, Ryan, had been convicted of abusing a child before, what should have been a bright red flag for caseworkers. It prompted questions from Target 8, which launched the Ombudsman's investigation. Target 8 discovered that CPS even got a tip from someone fearing for the new baby's safety before the abuse happened. But Layla's mother says a CPS investigator showed up at her home, looked around, and left. No discussion about Dad, she said.
I didn't mean to.
And in the tragic case of baby Glenn Ross Jr., a concern was raised early on to CPS, even before the baby was ever taken home from the hospital. Baby Glenn's dad was mentally unstable and unable to handle a baby.
I went like this, he bounced, and landed back on the cushion. He didn't fall off, nothing like that.
The end result seen here in a Kalamazoo police interrogation room video, where Glenn Ross Sr. used a doll to demonstrate what he did to his newborn son.
Why won't you quit crying? And I started going like this.
Okay.
And after I do that.
How many times?
Twice, still two.
Okay.
Then I do this with put him on the couch, but I didn't throw him on the floor. I threw him on the couch.
CPS normally won't comment on specific cases, but in that one they did, admitting to Target 8 that the caseworker dropped the ball and no longer works for the agency. Now, top brass at CPS tell us there's a broader problem with caseworkers who are failing to identify and act on so-called threatened harm.
We're seeing either a misapplication of this policy or a misunderstanding of it.
Colin Parks is among the top officials at CPS and gave Target 8 special access to the new threatened harm training program that he's taking statewide.
Your obligation is to dig. Your obligation is to take a look at that case history. I think one of the things that workers struggle with is being able to dig in to that history and to be able to establish that pattern.
An illustration here in CPS's own audit of its own baby match system, a threatened harm finding tool that alerts the agency when parents with prior CPS contact have a new child. CPS found that many of those cases weren't getting the proper follow-up, and hardly any were brought before a judge, even when it was required by the policy.
There's nothing in those investigations that shows that workers did that digging that we've been talking about, where they took a look to see if services really benefited that family.
Park's clear message to these workers?
That these investigations need to be done more thoroughly and in accordance with policy. And if they're done in that way, kids are going to be safer.
Better decisions by CPS would no doubt mean better protection for our children. But the primary responsibility for our kids remains in the hands of their families. In the end, it's the parents that are really on the front lines, not the state.
There are times when there's nothing that you can do. Yeah, there are times.
CPS is taking that new training to counties statewide, and Target 8 will keep tracking the agency's progress.